This act highlights the helplessness of the innocent people in front of this unjust and cruel legal authority, which insists on maintaining hard and fast rules, despite the fact that it's completely irrelevant or impossible, really, even at a common sense level, to believe that they should. So what we're seeing here is that the officials of the court and the people who uphold the court are adhering to taking actions which maintain the structure rather than actually listening to people's individual stories. They're there to protect the system, and they don't care what happens to the people who live within that system. So first of all, we meet Judge Haythorne, and we overhear him questioning Martha Corey. We also meet Judge Danforth, who turns out to be the coldest, most calculating, and least flexible and accommodating of any of the judges. We see Francis Nurse and Giles Corey. They present their cases to Danforth and Haythorne, even though Hale has said that they shouldn't have to. Danforth dismisses their pleas to have their evidence heard, and Haythorne responds to this when they plead with him. They say that they really want to come before the court, and he says he'll charge them with contempt. Danforth constantly mentions the status and the power of the court and the number of people he has condemned to hang. Go through the act and find them. He ignores their cries of fraud and deceit. Then Proctor comes in with Mary Warren, and he tells Danforth that Mary has decided to testify that there is no witchcraft. This brings immediate protests from Paris, who is, as usual, afraid of his own skin and of losing his own position. But Hale urges Danforth to listen, and Proctor is once again questioned about his faith. Hale stands up and argues that Danforth cannot judge Proctor on the evidence, and when Danforth tells Proctor that because of his wife's pregnancy she's going to be saved for at least a year, he expects Proctor to be satisfied, but he isn't. What Proctor realises is that he needs to help his friends and their wives, and at this point we see Proctor's personal ordeal subordinated to Salem's ordeal. Danforth does agree to hear the testament that Proctor has brought to clear Rebecca Nurse and Martha Corey, and they are horrified when Danforth issues arrests for cross-examination. Corey charges Putnam, the vindictive character, with inciting his daughter Ruth to accuse a townsman on witchcraft. Proctor requests that Mary Warren's deposition be heard. It's all procedure. What we see is that Hale comes into conflict with Danforth. Hale's beginning to have really serious misgivings about what's going on in the play. He says things like, halfway down page 79, I think that in all justice you must, and Danforth pushes him aside and says, then let him submit his evidence in the proper affidavit. This is an old illiterate farmer. He's not going to be able to submit a proper affidavit. When Danforth starts to question Mary Warren, he's brutal, he's cold. He threatens her with jail, whichever way she states the truth. And then he brings Abigail and a chorus of girls into the room. There are two major turning points in this scene. We see Hale's moral growth. We know already that Hale is the only character in the entire play who winds up believing something from what he believed, different from something to what he believed at the start. He starts to challenge the authority of the court because he can see it being misapplied. And secondly, we see John realising that he needs to take responsibility for those who are close to him. Danforth and Paris are very threatened by John Proctor because he's clearly an intelligent man. Danforth in particular is simply not accustomed to having his authority questioned. Just you wait till you get to the end of the act where Abigail starts having a go at Judge Danforth as well. So what's happened here is that the community of Salem has given evil an institutional status, and by doing that, it's actually handed the power of life and death over to ambitious and corrupt men. Paris, Haythorne and Danforth are a triumvirate where we see that their underlying self-serving motivation will bend the rules of the court for their own ends. They are Christians, but they have no charity. They use the situation that they're in just to protect their increasingly tenuous hold on a changing society. So a bit of vocabulary for you. You can call Danforth hard, cruel, illogical, pompous, politically ambitious. He's always talking about his own power and status. He refers to his own experience, but in fact, he displays quite a lot of weakness. He's very used to people treating him as a superior, and he's very suspicious of those who don't. His language is precise and educated, and that sets him apart from the other people. He's calculating, he sets traps, he tries to bring out what he thinks is Proctor's real reason for coming to court by offering Elizabeth a stay of execution because she's pregnant. And he knows that ultimately he's putting all these people to death, and he does believe that he is right in doing so. But to maintain that position, he blocks evidence, he doesn't listen, he supports the accusers, he won't accept depositions that he doesn't like from Giles. He refuses at first to accept Proctor's deposition, but then once he hears that what the girls are doing has gone out to the village, he relents a little bit. He thinks that Elizabeth's pregnancy is probably just convenient, and then he uses that information to try and get Proctor to reveal his intentions to undermine the court. He offers him a deal. Everything that Danforth does is black and white. He utters this very important quote. He says, "We burn a hot fire here. It melts down all concealment." And a little bit later on, we have him saying that you are either with the court or against it. There be no middle way. I can't find the exact words. A person is either with this court or he must be counted against it. There be no road between. Now, clearly that's fallacious. It's not possibly true. There are lots of ways in between, but that's the way he sees things, cut and dried. Haythorne, similarly, very politically ambitious. And as the act unfolds, we see that after Abigail and the other girls have been ordered to come into the court, we see Abigail in full flight, absolutely denying all the charges that Mary Warren has made against her. And when Proctor challenges Abigail's faith, Paris quickly challenges that. Haythorne also provides arguments that help destroy the testimony of the pleaders. He destroys Mary's testimony by demanding that she faint, which of course she is unable to do. Because the conditions for the hysteria, which have led to the fainting, are not there. She can't faint on demand. Abigail shows an extraordinary backbone, standing up to the authority of Danforth, who weakens under her threat. We have Abigail actually saying to him, "I have done my duty, pointed out the devil's people, and now this is my reward, to be mistrusted, denied, questioned and then Danforth tries to reassure her, and she says, "Let you beware, Mr. Danforth, that you be so mighty that the powers of hell may not turn your wits. Beware." I mean, really, what a way for her to speak to somebody in his position. So she insists, she says that everything that Mary Warren has said is a lie. She says that Elizabeth Proctor has lied about the puppets. She says that any time she's being questioned, she turns to the spirits, and she is absolutely formidable. She is calculating. She is shocking. She has domination over everybody, including the judges who have been sent there to run the whole proceedings. Mary Warren can't stand it, and she collapses under the pressure. And Abigail bungs on the biggest turn of all, and she sees an imaginary yellow bird. But before she does that, John does his block big time and says, "Whore, how do you call heaven? Whore, whore." And Herrick says, "What, man, what are you?" Proctor says, "It is a whore." And Danforth, dumbfounded, can't believe the way this is going, says, "You charge," and Abigail says, "Mr. Danforth, he is lying." And Proctor says, "Mark her, now she'll scream to stab me with." And Danforth says, "You will prove this. This will not pass." Proctor, trembling, his life collapsing about him, "I have known her, sir, I have known her." Danforth says, "You are a lecher." And with that, Proctor says, his voice is about to break with his shame and grief, what he's done in the proper place where my beasts are bedded, and that was the last night of my joy. He insists that his wife is honest, innocent. He says, "I have rung the doom on my good name. You will believe me, Mr. Danforth, but my wife is innocent, except that she knew a whore when she saw one." Because, of course, what's been going on is that Elizabeth was trying to hide what it was that John had actually done. I have not mentioned, yes, the next thing that happens is that we see Elizabeth being brought forward. Danforth wants to check that this story is actually true. He brings Elizabeth up, and we see Elizabeth struggling painfully with her own sense of self. Will she be able to admit the truth, or is it something that she can't face doing? She tries hard to conceal the truth of what John has done when Danforth questions her. She says, "I fancied that he turned from me," but when she's actually pushed really, really hard, she lies. She tells the first lie of her life, and she says, "No, that he is not a lecher." And then John confesses that he has in fact told them the truth. It's a very harrowing scene to watch. Hale says, it's a natural lie to tell. I beg you, stop now before another is condemned. I may shut my conscience to it no more. Private vengeance is working through this testimony." So what we have in this whole act is the competition between vengeance and justice, vengeance and power. The idea of the vengeance, once he's admitted his lechery, John expects that means that Abigail's motive will be understood and that everything will change, but that is not what happens. Abigail keeps on taking control, just at the point where Danforth says, "She spoke nothing of lechery, and this man has lied." Hale says, "I believe him," and points at Abigail. "This girl has always struck me as false." At which point, Abigail stacks on the biggest turn of the lot, and she starts imagining that she can see a yellow bird, and we get this terrifying business of the other girls starting to mimic what is said, and Mary Warren's spirit allegedly being sent out through this yellow bird. Although Mary says, I'm here. Mary decides that she's not able to withstand what Abigail will do to her. She collapses under the pressure like a teenage girl. She decides that her allegiance is with Abigail. She appears manipulative. She's conscious of the things that she does, but in building the force of the hysteria, she may even believe that something is happening. If she suddenly admits to lying, or if she confesses her true motive, she knows that she could lose her life, just as Mary Warren has been threatened by Danforth. At the end of this act, we see that Hale is not fooled by anybody, and he flounces out saying, "I quit this court." Elizabeth has tried to save her husband's life, but in so doing, she has condemned him to death.